not broken from this place to ever show. Heaven approaches.
So part of this whole day, obviously, is the opportunity for everybody to meet, to network. But it's also a sense of deriving the kind of strategy that is a citizen-led way of moving forward with reforestation and care for the earth. And in that sense, in this panel discussion, we are wanting to bring our mind back to those 5 key questions from the beginning of the day, which Adam will go over, and also to have a sense of our real action points and strategy and way forward. And again, that point between 2 and 7 here this evening, if anybody wants to feed into any points that they want to make sure is part of our collective of how we move forward. And also for those people on the live stream, you're really welcome to send in ideas via the email or on the Twitter, Facebook, so that we can hear the contributions and what's that stirred in you for the way that we need to be moving forward as a collective. So a cooperative as a whole gaggle. So without further ado, I'll hand this over to Adam.
Hi everyone again. Wow, it's gone past really quick. Suddenly we're here. I know that Wendy and David have been introduced, but I just wanted to start with each of you here, just sort of briefly saying what brought you to this and what you're doing now in terms of trees, what your passion is, if you like. So if I start with you, John.
As I've got the microphone. Very briefly, John Tucker from the Woodland Trust. What brought me here? What's my main interest? I spend most of my time touring the country, talking to anybody who's got land and who might be interested in trees. I try to come up with a solution and explain to them that trees can often help address some of the problems and the issues that they've got, and it's just trying to match them up. So from a crofter in Scotland to a local authority in Manchester about air quality, to a Welsh hill farmer about lamb welfare, outdoor lambing and shelter and stuff like that, water quality, soil erosion, I can bore people with all the good benefits that trees can bring. So that's how I spend my time. Today's been great. More power to my brain, to things to think about.
Wendy?
Yes, so I'm here with Tree Sisters and the Converging World, planting trees by the millions with Tree Sisters around the world, mainly in the tropics, and with the Converging World, we invest in renewable energy and we use the surplus for reforestation. And we'd like to go to the capital markets and raise a lot more money to accelerate reforestation through that method.
David, yes, please.
Yeah, well, yes. So I'm a semi-retired scientist who's had a very lifelong interest in trees, and in the role of trees in environmental circumstances. And I suppose Susie picked me out to come on the basis of the fact that I coordinated a very large study about 10 years ago now with the Forestry Commission, whose inputs were great, and with help from the Woodland Trust, examining what the responses of UK forests might be, to what extent we could predict the responses of UK forests to the threats emerging then, but becoming increasingly realistic, of climate change, enrichments of CO2, changes of temperature, alterations of the water cycle, and all those things. So we looked at the impact immediately, and we looked forward under a range of different scenarios at how our trees might respond in terms of the suitability for different soils and regions, how we might need in different parts of the country to reconsider the range of species which might be appropriate, bearing in mind that we are planting not for our lifetimes, but for the lifetimes of our kids. And what we plant now will receive the environmental circumstance 50 years down the line. So it is important to look forward. And that's what that document tried to do, with as much accuracy as was possible, which may never have been enough.
Isla.
I'm Isla MacLeod, and I'm here as a pilgrim of the earth and guardian of the trees and a mother. My path began with the trees some time ago after leaving education, very bewildered, lost, confused, depressed, and fortunately found myself going to a meditation retreat, and leaving there was called to the forest. And it was my journey spending 2 years in solitude in the forest in Sussex, which rewilded my soul, and it was a longing which I think most of us feel. And I'm still very much learning what that looks like and how I can articulate that, because the language of the trees is not our language. But I'm doing my best to listen, and I show up and I spend as much time with trees as I can. I'm writing more at the moment, and I have held some workshops and retreats. I'm also very interested in the role and the inseparable connection between trees and our ancestors, and exploring the way we can express our grief and honour the ancestral realms, the unseen realms, through ceremony and ritual.
Thank you. My name is Simon Miles, and welcome to the show. I'm formally trained in horticulture, amenity horticulture. I've been a landscaper, a tree surgeon. I've run a local authority parks department, and I'm now 8 years into forest gardening. Have a forest garden in Cornwall, in Falmouth, and I help other people through my nursery with plants for their forest gardens. I help them create and design their dreams, help make their dreams come true.
Thanks, everyone. So the 5 questions that we started off with I think in many ways we've covered them today. The range of subjects that I've just written down quickly that we've covered has been huge. We've talked about the language of science and how it relates to trees. We've covered the sentience of trees, support networks, engaging the city and whether commerce is fit for purpose, how we do that, some of the barriers. We've talked about sequestration and also going forwards. But I think I would like, if we start off, to just go back to those 5 questions so that we can try and put together for Susie, or with Susie, a strategy to respond to the next COP26, to the next convention. And I think if we start off just right back almost at the first point, if I can ask, if I start with you, John, we've talked about the tree cover, but in terms of the UK, what percentage tree cover are we looking for, and what date to sort of achieve what we're trying to do?
Very simple question. I have a love-hate relationship with statistics. So at the moment, the UK has a tree cover of 13%. So if you compare that with an EU tree cover is 37%, Europe's 44%. So we're right at the bottom. I think we've got more trees than Malta and Gibraltar, but not many other countries. So we're at the bottom. Is that a reason in itself to have more trees? Probably not. So that 13%, if you talk to government would say, well, actually, we're in a pretty good place, because in 1066, we had a 14% tree cover. So, statistics, you can use them to suit your own purposes. So to go back to the question, what cover would I like? I think the independent panel report in England wanted a cover suggestion of 15%, which is heading in the right direction for me. I was amazed, when
sounds low. 15%.
Well, yeah, maybe I've been too steeped in being browbeaten by not being able to plant at the accelerated rates that we've heard talked about today. 15% would be a great start for me. I mean, we're people may not realize, David mentioned figures of 23,000 hectares. We're planting at the moment at the lowest rate for probably 40 years. So we've got a huge amount of ground to make up. Money would help, but there's a huge amount of bureaucracy you've got to go through now before you can stick a tree in the ground. And it just puts people off. So 15% would be a great start for me. In England at the moment, I don't think the Forestry Commission or DEFRA, I don't think they even call it a target. They've got an aspiration to plant 5,000 hectares a year. I think last year they planted 700 hectares. This year they planted 1,100 hectares. So we're way off it at the moment. So 15% for me would be a great start. It would be a great start if we just met that aspiration. So.
Wow. Okay. I didn't realise it was that hard.
It is,
I really
unfortunately. It's people are, I speak to a lot of farmers, and they are just browbeaten by paperwork. If they get it wrong in terms of planting trees in the wrong place, they get penalised. They can lose their basic farm payment. So there's an incredible amount of bureaucracy around it. It just doesn't help, even if they've got a willingness to do the right thing. Can I just add one other quick thing as well? We talk about forest cover, we talk about woodlands, but we forget about individual trees as well. So the trees you see in the hedgerows, in the fields, nobody thinks about them, but we're losing huge numbers of them as well. So something else to consider.
Okay. David, can we go up on 15%?
Yeah, but only if we split the nations. So the Scottish legislation aims for 18%, but we are left at 12%, which is absolutely pathetic. And that's with, as John implies, that's with proposed for increased planting over what we're doing at the moment, which is an absolute disaster. But at least we're moving in the right direction. I agree. So 18 and 12, by my maths, is average at 15.
Okay. Wendy, did you have any take on this from your, from the work you're doing with Converging Worlds?
I suppose, my background, I've worked in policy, international policy and strategy, and I probably alluded to it earlier. And John has just mentioned it there, the bureaucracy is getting in the way. And, you have these declarations at an international level that say we're going to reforest the planet at these kind of rates. And what happens, I'll give you a very specific example. I know I raised it earlier, but just in the UK, there's something called the Carbon Reduction Commitment, which is actually being phased out. And the Carbon Reduction Commitment requires large corporations to improve their energy efficiency and actually reduce their carbon over a number of years. And if they don't, then they have to pay for what they don't achieve. So it's actually money that goes into the treasury. Now, that is one form of regulation that has come in that is actually part of the whole target working towards Kyoto. It's a carbon reduction commitment. Nowhere can those companies actually achieve a sequestration of CO2, which is much better than just reducing the emissions that we would otherwise do. Nowhere does it allow for them to do that through reforestation. So regulation does not support the declarations that come down from the top. And somehow, through the COPs, we have to get that message back because the bureaucracy at the moment is not aligned with the messages that seem to be there at an international level. And unless we address that, we can throw all the money we like at it. It's not going to happen.
Right. I'd like to ask a question. I guess following on from that, I think certainly listening to Claire, a sort of bottom up, involving community is a way forward. Almost not ignoring, obviously working with the body politic and also working with companies, but getting communities involved is a way forward.
Yeah, and I think it's top down and bottom up, and somehow we have to influence the top. So it's not impossible. Everybody thinks, well, it's over there and it's in Bonn and I'm not invited to the table, but we are. There are routes through that. And actually, one of the exciting things about this tree conference is when the UN Committee on Climate Change and Reforestation came out and said we must accelerate reforestation to avoid catastrophic climate change, and we must engage the civic sector and the public sector and the private sector, was that there wasn't a collective response as far as I could see. And actually, at that time, I was looking around for a collective response that was bottom up as well as governmental. And when Susie said she was putting on this tree conference, I thought that's really exciting, because actually this is what's needed. I mean, the people in this room are the tribe that Diana said. The people in this room have the ideas and they have the collective will, if you like, to be able to influence right up to COP26. It can be done. It's not as hard as we think. And so one of the things that would be wonderful from these questions and how to influence is that we start getting together and we start listing what are the barriers. Where are the bureaucratic barriers? Where are the financial barriers? And then coming up with the solutions, because the solutions will exist. We just have to be able to put them on the table.
Thank you. Yeah.
So when I'm talking to anybody, there are two questions that really interest me if they're interested in planting trees. One is what their objective is, and one where they want to plant them. So lots of people have lots of different objectives, and the site then will determine where they want to go. For me, speaking for the Woodland Trust, our main drivers are biodiversity, wildlife and people. So that leans us towards native species. And we had some fantastic descriptions of the wide benefits that you will get from those species. From David's point of view, if you were just thinking about carbon sequestration, you want something that will grow quick. So that's Sitka spruce, Douglas fir, things like that. So, for me, I would go for native species. And I think we've got enough genetic adaptability in those species and enough species, those native species, we're not thinking about at the moment, really. Things like wild service. Somebody mentioned field maple. We've got hornbeam. We've got rowans. We've got whitebeam. Loads of them. For this part of the world, the poplars, the willows, the aspens, they're brilliant. So there's loads more that we can do. I think 64% of the UK's broadleaf woodland is made up of just 5 species. And if you think, ash is one of those, oak is one of those, both of which have got disease problems. So, there's a huge variety of native species we could do more with. But I think the conifers have a place, non-native conifers have a place as well.
Are you suggesting not planting ash or oak because of the pests and disease?
No, I think oak is safe to plant. I don't think, you're not allowed to buy oak, or nurseries are not allowed to sell, nurseries are not allowed to sell ash at the moment because of ash dieback, as I understand. So, but I wouldn't give up on ash at the moment. There's a lot of research on it at the moment, and I wouldn't give up on elm at the moment. I live near Brighton. Brighton still has 17,000 mature, healthy elms left. It's a fantastic place to go to. We talked about wych elm today. Fantastic tree. We shouldn't give up on these things. So I think. So I'm sorry. Have I ducked the question or have I answered it? I don't know.
Very well. I mean, as you say, Diana gave us a very good summary of trees, and they were nearly all native. I think there was possibly one tree in there that I wouldn't have thought was native. But are we looking at planting non-native trees? I noticed in this report it does talk about eucalyptus and some trees that might raise an eyebrow if you like.
Yeah.
But if they're doing the job, maybe that's the way forward.
Yeah, and there is we have. David was right. We import 80% of the timber that we use, but we do have quite a thriving timber sector, which I think we need to support as well. So conifers, well planted in the right place, can do that job, and we can design forests now to, avoid some of the pitfalls that we sort of shot ourselves in the foot in the 60s. Eucalyptus, you can plant it. I was noticing quite a few on the drive down today, but they will grow at 6 feet a year, some of the varieties, quite easily. But I've seen a 60-acre eucalyptus plantation in the Midlands which was completely frost damaged and killed when we had the colds of 2012.
David, do you want to respond?
I don't disagree with any of what John said, really. What I was talking about when I was emphasizing the exotic Sitka spruce was to establish some kind of buffer so that the native species that we plant under his wonderful schemes and others that you have in for example, here in Somerset, are protected in the future by a relatively carbon-free environment. So this is what we have to think forward in terms of what we need to do to the environment that we're producing to ensure that planting schemes which we undertake at the moment to give us diversity are protected and not put at risk by serious advances in risk of drought of drought in particular, and of disease. And we haven't had time to talk enough about disease. Just one aspect of afforestation that hasn't been covered, which comes to my mind when John was talking about eucalyptus. Energy crops in general are important possibles. So we could do some more energy cropping in this country. We wouldn't need to use eucalyptus, which may be decreasingly susceptible to frost in our warming environment, but nobody's mentioned poplar. The genotypes of poplar that have been developed in France for cellulose production are tremendous in terms of their growth rates and their productivities. And you can even make an argument for the fact that that would be a native species, but this would be short rotation, 10, 11 years. And it's a different objective. It's not the amenity objective. It's again the energy, the substitution for fossil fuels argument that would come to the fore there.
And I think the neighbourhood plan that we started with at the beginning of the day is probably the thing that we need to give some attention to. And the way to do that, having been a parks officer, there used to be various people that used to come at me and give me a hard time. And there were various people that used to come at me and be very nice and very solution orientated. And you can guess which way I gravitated, can't you? So bear that in mind if you're going to speak to the people that run the neighbourhood plan. If you give them solutions, not problems, you'll make progress.
I came from a fairly conventional background. I travelled a bit when I was growing up, went to boarding school, went to university, and as I described earlier, got quite lost and went and learnt to meditate and did a lot of that for a year. And then I moved to the woods, and I can't describe what that call was, but it was something cellular. It was something really powerful that overrode everything else. All that the culture was telling me that I lived in, my family, even my peers, and spending time with trees every day, learning about the Celtic lunar calendar, so the Council of the 13 trees of this country, and spending time with each of those 13 trees. Opened doorways that I never knew possible. And I felt the calling to undertake an initiation with the yew tree over the period of a year. And I can't describe to you what it is that I hear when I'm in relationship with trees and when I'm communicating with them. There are different types of feeling that we have. Some of us are more kinesthetic, some of us are audible. And I doubted it. I really doubted it because my rational mind was saying, this is ludicrous. You know, these trees aren't talking to you. But I just knew in my heart that I was following something much deeper than what my mind was telling me. So I went for it and I kept checking in. It's using my discernment as well, you know. It's not separating off that kind of body feeling response from our mind. It's bringing them back into alignment, into harmony. And I think that represents a lot about our masculine and our feminine perception. How can we align our heart and our mind in response to the world? And for me, when I'm in the company of trees, I drop into my body. I feel really closely what it is that I'm responding to in a sort of field of a tree. Often it's quite heart sense, maybe a tingling, an opening, and often there's feelings up the back of my spine. I get movement in different sort of chakras and energy centers, maybe some warm places. And I just follow it. And then the mind might kind of jump in and just want to go somewhere else. And I'm just like, just listen and trust. And I think that's what the key is for this. We can't really make sense of something like this with our mind, I don't feel. I think our minds are really limited at the moment, but I think we're really beginning to smash through that. And this conference brings me real hope. As is the work that Tree Sisters do. I think that dreaming is something collectively that we really need to be focusing on. It's something Indigenous traditions have been doing since the beginning of time. If we come together and use this energy of our imaginal to relate to the trees, to the earth, to the stones, and be in conversation with them. And it might just feel like we're making it up. It might just feel like it's in our imagination. But we are still experiencing that. That is our reality. And by really allowing ourselves to drop back into some sort of ancient way of knowing, a way of knowing that is cellular, that we're not separate. And therefore, when we are hearing responses from the trees, when we're listening to them and we're feeling guided by them, it might seem like it's coming from within ourselves, but it is, because we are Mother Nature. We come from her, we go back to her. And I think as the question itself, like, yes, obviously, I think they are. And I wish I could give examples, but there are so many. I mean, I would spend so many nights just sitting with trees, and I would, in all the different seasons, and they became my best friends. Really, I didn't, before I moved to the woods, I didn't really feel like I belonged on this earth. I felt like a bit of a black sheep and a bit of a lost soul in many respects, and I finally felt at home, and that I could see these reflections in the trees which I wasn't seeing in other human beings, and I was able to learn from them and understand ways of receptivity from different characteristics of different trees that gave me strength and clarity and much more of a willingness to sort of stand up and be counted and make a difference. And they give you courage, looking at the oak, we've talked about the oak today, as a symbol for us to really to just walk the talk together. We can look at the oak tree, its endurance, its perseverance, its longevity, and its courage and its power and its expression as a symbol of what we can all achieve. And it's going to take time, but we're in it for the long haul. We've got our children's children to think about. Yeah, I could go off on this. Maybe I should just stop there.
Thanks, Simon. Yeah. Suze?
Can I interject a question? If you want to answer that one too, I'm really up for it. But just can I interject that we do ask the panelists what they think should be our strategy?
Yes, we'll be doing. I'll be doing that at the end.
Yeah. So the question, are trees sentient? And you're asking an engineer. And an accountant.
You said you're up for it.
So, it's something I think that we feel, but we don't allow ourselves to accept it, because we are brought up in an education system that kills magic and demands rational approaches, and therefore, going back to 5 when we felt it. It gets, unfortunately, our children, it's thrashed out of them, really. And I think that's part of it. And, sometimes birds, for example, and different creatures, the dragonfly, will see many different colours to what we can see. And we can't see them, but it doesn't mean to say that they don't exist. And I think it's the same. Alan was talking this morning about flows of energy, and tree is another. It's just a flow of energy, and we're all part of that. We're not separate from it. So if we're not separate from it, as an engineer, we're taught to sort of look at thermodynamics. The amount of effort you put in is what you will get out. But we're ignoring so much more, so much of the energy we have forgotten how to feel that can't be measured in quite the same way. And so I read recently something. So I think it's something that we perhaps feel, but we close off to. We can't accept it. But if we just open up to it and really start to feel, I stood by a tree recently, and it wasn't until afterwards I thought that tree was vibrating, and I felt the vibration of the tree. It was tiny, but I felt it, and I don't know what that was about. And then I was reading a book, and I would highly recommend this book to everyone. It's by a forester in Germany, and it's called The Hidden Life of Trees. And in that book, it describes how trees vibrate. Everything vibrates at different resonances and frequencies. And I thought, I did feel it. I'm not going to close off to that. And when you think that we are just a flow of energy, really, that's all we are. And you can hear me now because I've got a voice box, but it's just vibration, and it's just my response. It's just a flow of energy to everything else that's in the neighborhood. And there was a particular piece. There's been some tests in a laboratory where the vibration has increased in some of the plants, and others have turned. They've actually responded to the change in the frequency and the vibration. And then it said this poignant piece, that when trees are thirsty, the vibration increases. And I suddenly thought, if that tree had a voice box, it would be screaming. And it says that. You would hear them screaming. And that so moved me, because actually everything that Alan was saying about flows of energy and everything I've been saying and all that we feel, we're not separate. And therefore, does that mean we can't eat them? And what does that mean for burning logs? Well, you know, the native Indian in America and elsewhere, with all our tribes of people, they're just, because it's all part of the same thing, they will just give reverence to whatever they need to be part of them. It's how it's done, I think. So yes, they're sentient.
I said. Yeah. Okay. So just to wrap up, I think Susie wants a quick, minute each, quick summary on how we take all of this this forward. A quick summary of the day, if you like, just sort of bullet points from each of you, if you don't mind. Shall we starting with you, John? Yeah, there you go.
So I've actually, my wife phoned me at tea time and said, how's the day going? And I said, really enjoyable, but I'm finding it really challenging. You know, Wendy's an engineer, I'm a forester. It's all black and white to me. And this today has been not about black and white. So for me, in my mind, it's how can you translate that energy into activity? And despite my rather pessimistic sort of view that the bureaucracy and stuff like that, you know, we're in a democracy, so that bottom-up energy should be able to shift us. And it's how we can capture that, translate it, and do something about it. So, you know, that's what my takeaway from that today is really, you know, how can I, you know, Bruce was talking about he was singing in, where was it, Spain, and ended up crying. You know, maybe that's what I've got to do, and then I can sort of do something more positive about it. So, but it's, yeah.
That's it, yeah.
I think the takeaway is that it's not either or, it's all, it's everything. And it's how we articulate that in a way that we can support the grassroots, to make the difference on the ground, how we bring in the finance to do that, and how we change legislation and to allow it to flow more easily. And if there was something that was to come out of this, it has to be a collective response, whether that's remotely through in email, or whether a group of people get together. I would like to sign up for that group, because I think there's a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And if we think of our continental neighbours, we've all agreed we start from a very, very low base. Fungi haven't been mentioned in this discussion. Let's just mention them, Alan. If you go to any of our neighbouring countries in Europe, you will find in the local market not only a wide range of forest fungi, most of them mycorrhizal, and but you probably will find an inspector there who will be knowledgeable of all of those species and will advise people as to what are suitable for eating and what are poisonous. There is an inherent culture associated with that 30 or 40% woodland culture, which we lost long ago. And what we need to do, by whatever means, is get it back. So we don't teach our kids that all mushrooms are poisonous. Ooh, they're toadstools, except Agaricus bisporus, which is a bloody weed. We're a long way behind the game. And the kinds of activity that you're promoting here are a help. They're moving us in the right direction. And by whatever means you achieve that, I think it's honourable, and it's something that we should encourage. We've got a lot of ground to make up, and I think we're beginning to do it. And I do believe that governments, Scottish and British and UK, are behind us in this, so I'm optimistic.
The words that are coming to me are integration because I feel that there's been a lot of balancing within myself coming today about science and intuition and how we can marry the two and start to really work together. And the other is action. And for me, it feels like we can talk about all these things, but unless we're actually addressing our consciousness, essentially, and how we are approaching the planting, how we can move forward, for me, feels... I can't see that working. In my imaginal, when I go forward into how this is going to work, like Claire was talking about, we need to really look at our relationship with the earth and with each other. And that might involve us individually, each going and spending more time with trees. I do some amazing work with Gordon Field, who's an artist and made this and some other of the artwork. And I'm a tree guardian to a male oak tree, a beacon tree. And these trees are really getting louder in what they're saying. And I think that's partly why the tree conference is now and why it's Samhain, which is the time of the ancestors, the veil is thin. They're speaking to us now about us really listening and taking action. So spending time with them, literally just in their energy field, is crucial. Take more people with you. Sing with them. Make offerings. You know, it's about reverence. I think for us to be talking about planting without any heart is missing the point. We need to come back to how we can be responsive to and listen to how they want us to plant them and where and which species. But I'm really positive. I'm hopeful, and I think that there's a lot that can come from this sort of seed event, and it's going to go out as a microcausal network. I didn't say that right, but I wanted to honour the mushrooms because that was another big key for me in the ancestors and the trees, which will have to be spoken about another time.
So it's been a long day, and we've covered a lot of ground. And what I observed in Bruce's film, speaking to the indigenous people, and Isla sharing some of her thoughts, with Isla and those indigenous people, they are actually connecting to the planet they're walking on. And I think you'll find that most of us who live in concrete homes are a little bit detached from that. So I'm hoping that as a result of this day, that people will go away and get a little bit more attached to their planet and go out and spend some time with some trees, go out and plant some trees, go out and design a forest garden, and I'll help you if I can, and make it happen. And I honestly believe that the effect I had from Planted Tree 73 could be replicated for other children. And that will have an effect on their life, and they'll go on and do other things, because I believe those are the beings that are going to take the planet forward after the good ladies have done their good work. Over 30 years ago, I asked her a question of some wise old woman about the future of the planet. And she gave me a response I just looked oddly at because I didn't know what she meant. But she said, "You'll find it's the mothers of the earth will save the planet." And interesting what's been said today, Wendy. So it's been a joy. I hope you'll take some of it away with you and apply it yourselves. And I'm so glad I got invited. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a privilege to have you on the panel. Susie. Do you want to say what you think? Oh wow! I think as a group, as a collective, we've addressed an aspect of the environmental situation that a lot of us have been scared to name, and it is, I think, the sacred. I think it is that. I think it's our relationship. It's how we look at it. It's how we relate to the world around us. And I think it's been beautifully discussed and bravely discussed. And I think it's gone way, the debate and the discussion has gone way beyond what I thought it might do. And I just feel a bit humbled and proud of it as well. I think it's been beautifully held, really. But I think this is this is where we have to go. I think we have to look inside as much as we have to look outside. I really do think that.
Thank you so much to all of the speakers, the panel. That was amazing. And I feel really fortunate that our fabulous team have supported that so that that's now on the live stream. And in the coming 3 or 4 or 5 days, we're going to edit that down into a YouTube video so that that's available for people to share and work with, distribute, so that it's not just the lovely people that have joined us on the live stream today, but it's also the opportunity to put that out there. There's so much information that have been in these talks. I'm going to sit down with pen and paper and just go over it all over again in order to work out some of the key action points that have just been expressed so clearly that it's straightforward to work with. I'm going to pick out a few. I'm going to highlight that I feel like, as with what Adam mentioned, and a whole load of different things that have come out of it, I also feel like this sense of this group together to look at the collective response feels like a quite straightforward way in which we can move forward. That obviously all of you are going to carry on with the epic plantings and the epic work with community and schools and all of those things, but I think keeping in contact with us and those of you who want to step forward to get involved in stuff around understanding what that collective response might look like and how we can articulate that, what the blocks to its success might be, and then helping to remove them, would be really formidable, and totally in keeping with what's required right now. So I would offer you to get involved and let us know if that's something that you want to get involved in, and also, even if it's not something that you directly feel like you want to contribute towards, to keep on following and keep on being aware, because that is in its own way a huge support. So to give you a sense of where we're moving forward, definitely, as well as how that will look with that collective response thing, next year's event will be about education, tree education. And in that sense, that's, if you're looking, because I am a secondary school maths teacher and a mother, I am conscious of the 5 core subjects at GCSE as a point where the next generation has an opportunity to make decisions about where they want to be going in the future, and how important it is that they're informed by a version of science and maths and English that is relevant to them, and is radical and is exciting and is in alignment with what we are exploring today around the consciousness of nature. So in line with that, in the big picture of things, we have 2 amazing sponsors. We have Mary Fisher, who is quite a wondrous force of nature herself, and she has stood behind us right from the very beginning, and just powered us into this conference, and trusted us and believed in us. So she fronts a huge organisation called 100 Good Deeds, which you can read about on the internet on our website. Thank you, Mary. We love you so much. Thank you. And to Seth and Lara Tobasnik, our other amazing sponsors again.